Hello there, all my friends and colleagues. This is Sam Collins, your coding and billing expert for chiropractic, specifically the H.J. Ross Company, and for all of you for the profession. It's something that we all love, something we want to make sure we're always being at our best. Well, one of the areas I commonly get questions, because I get them all the time in teaching seminars and doing our network service, of course, I get a lot of offices to say, hey, Sam, how do I properly document evaluation management? And considering the changes that have occurred with the update that happened in 2021, there's still some confusion. I think one of the things that always frustrated doctors of chiropractic was you often could have a patient that the exam takes a lot of time. The history is very involved, the patient has multiple complaints, but yet, because the medical decision making, if you will, or the severity of the problem wasn't high enough, you would be limited to a 202 or 203, even though you spent an hour. Well, of course, that has updated. And of course, now time can be used for an E&M code. But what about medical decision making? What about a patient, much like a medical doctor? They may see someone for a few minutes, but yet bill a high value code because of what they're seeing for. Is there some sort of protocol for us or a doctor of chiropractic to do that? And I will say, yes, there is. So, what we're going to focus on a little bit in this conversation is how to make sure we're understanding what the medical decision making portion of evaluation and management codes are. So, let's head over and go to the slides now. And what I want to focus in on here is the idea of medical decision making when it comes to E&M services. Let me make sure I've got this moving the way I want. Looks like this is coming up. Okay, there we go. It's just taking a little bit of time to pause. So you'll see here are the codes. We have, of course, the E&M codes we're all familiar with. Of course, it did change a little bit. We no longer have 99201. We have 202 to 205 and then 211 to 215. And of course, when you look at the codes, of course, they have the same protocols. A new patient is brand new or 3 years. An established patient would be someone you've seen within 3 years. So that didn't change. But what did change, and in fact, let's focus here, is that they took away all those old components that you had to have for an E&M code, the complexity, the site of service, and so forth. No longer do you have a minimum of a history and exam or a certain physical exam. Remember in the old system, you had to have kind of the number of bullets and the number of organ systems. They've taken that away. It doesn't mean you still wouldn't do some of that. It's just no longer part of it that is a mandatory level. The new system, of course, uses time or medical decision making. Now, time, of course, is pretty straightforward. It's the time you spend with the patient examining. So I want to make sure everyone gets that. It is the time, but not the time just face to face, but the time spent on the part of the visit in total. So if you are spending 30 minutes, but 10 of it is pre seeing the patient, maybe you're reviewing notes of the patient, or maybe you have an electronic health record system that the patient fills out a lot of detailed forms, history and so forth, family, and then you review, make some notes, and then get in the room with the patient. That all counts. So it is face to face time, but it's also the time you spend before the visit and after the visit, so long as it's related to the exam. The things you might do at the end would be completing the notes, as many of you might do. So you'll look here and you'll notice this is exactly what it says. We'll just pick the 99203, and you'll notice it says office or other outpatient visit for the evaluation and management of a new patient, which requires a medically appropriate history and or examination. So I want to highlight, now it just says medically appropriate. It's no longer a minimum per se. However, it does say of low level medical decision making. And actually, each of the codes do that. They will say whether it's straightforward, low, moderate, or high. Well, what we're going to focus on today is that understanding, but I do want to make clear that everyone sees what is written in the last sentence of every code. And it says, when using time for code selection, for 99203 specifically, notice it says 30 to 44 minutes of total time is spent on the date of the encounter. So what's important to note here, it's the things you do on the date. So if before the patient comes at 11 o'clock, 9 in the morning, you're reviewing their file of the history notes they sent in, that would count. Let's say you had a staff person help take information from the patient. The time the staff does it doesn't count, but the time that you spend reviewing the information from the staff would. In addition, would include the time after, like if you're completing the notes. So that part's pretty straightforward. I think that's pretty easy to see. However, it's dealing with the medical decision making. And of course, I think just like the old code set, it has the levels which say straightforward, low, moderate, and high. So when you see that, you still kind of go, well, what does that mean? So would a high level require that you spend 60 to 74 minutes? Well, it might. But think of it, have you ever been to a medical doctor when you've been with him or her for a relatively short period of time, but yet they bill a high value code? Because the codes are not only based on time, but also on the medical decision making. So if you spend less time, but yet it's of a high level of medical decision making, you could bill a higher code. Hence why an oncologist or a cardiologist often bill high level codes. Because even though they may not take an hour for the exam, the medical decision making, be that life or death because of those conditions, would certainly lend to it. Now, does chiropractic fit into that realm? Well, I think to some extent we do, so long as we understand what these levels mean. So straightforward, low, moderate, and high, you still hear that and go, well, what is that? So what we have here is a chart. And this is the chart. It's put out through the AMA, and it outlines each code with the level of decision making, the number and complexity of areas, the types of medical decision making in the sense of the things you have to do, whether testing, and the type of treatment. Now, I know I'm giving you this and you're thinking, wow, Sam, this is overwhelming, but I want to kind of break it down just a little bit simpler. We can go a little bit more in depth, and I'm going to suggest, a seminar with me and or our network service will be that place to do it. But let's take a look at kind of the simplistic nature of it. You'll notice here it says 99202 says straightforward. So, what does straightforward mean in the sense of what am I evaluating? Well, I think the easiest way to see it is notice that it says number and complexity of problems. It's just one self limited minor problem. So, in the simplest sense, a straightforward problem is one complaint to one area: my shoulder, my neck, my back. Even if you don't spend the 15 to 29 minutes with the service, could you still build the code? What if a patient came in and you were able to evaluate them in 10 minutes? Would it be sufficient to bill a 202 even though you didn't hit the 15-minute threshold? Absolutely. Because all it needs is one self-limited or minor problem. Pretty easy to see. And you can see the medical decision making is pretty minimal. It's not anything that you consider there's any life, death, morbidity, mortality, of course. So that one's pretty easy. It is straightforward. Well, let's talk about what does low mean. And this is where things I think sometimes people get a little bit confused, but low simply means a patient with notice two or more self-limited problems. So when a patient has two complaints, would that automatically make the complaints probably a 203, even if you don't spend a half an hour? Because some of you are going to say, Sam, I'm very efficient. I don't need to take 30 minutes to evaluate a knee and a shoulder or a neck and a low back together. And you're probably right. But you shouldn't be limited to just the 202 because you're efficient, but it's the level of problem. So think of it simply: one complaint, one area, 202. Two complaints, two areas, 203. But what's also with the 203, look at the last one. It says an acute, uncomplicated illness or injury. Now, we don't really qualify under the illness, but would a chiropractor qualify under injury? So you look at this, you're going to say, well, would trauma automatically make it a 203? In essence, it would. And it's because the medical decision making of trauma brings it up to where now you're going to do some additional things like order an x ray. So, therefore, that medical decision making becomes higher because you have to rule out other things. Could there be a fracture or something more severe? So, simply put, two complaints or trauma, 203. Now, where things get a little bit trickier, and I will say that chiropractors may not often qualify here, but you certainly may, is with the 204 or 214. Now, probably qualifying it for time won't be that difficult. Think of a personal injury patient that the exam and history does take 45 minutes to an hour. But what about that one that doesn't take that long? How does this fit? So here it says moderate, and you'll notice it says stable chronic illnesses, stable chronic illnesses. We don't really fit there, but notice the last one. It says an acute complicated injury. So that's not your simple trauma. But what about a person involved in a car accident with a whiplash disorder, but they also have numbness, tingling in the hand, or some radicular signs? I would certainly say that fits into a complicated problem. So again, regardless of the timing, it's also can be based on the severity or complexity of what the patient's presenting with. So moderate means probably for our purposes, not three areas, of course, that would still be a 202 or 203, excuse me, but the injury with complications. Now you're gonna have to look at complications to be, you're gonna start ruling out certain things. Like notice here, and it's hard to see, it talks about prescription drugs. Think of if a medical doctor is likely to script a drug for it, that automatically puts it up to a 204. And so I would say in that same case for us, the medical decision making is one that fits, but we're also going to do some additional things. Like when you have a complicated injury, are you going to do additional testing? Oh, you bet we are. You're going to probably send out for x-rays at minimum or take x-rays, maybe even MRI or CT scans. I mean, lots of other testing, NCVs and so forth. So again, that severity is not one necessarily that it takes more time, but the complexity of what you're reviewing. So again, time is one, but medical decision making the other. And I would say pretty severe trauma, in my opinion, will likely fit a 204, regardless if you don't spend 45 minutes or not. Now, what about the 205, 215? This is where things do get a little bit harder. I don't think we're going to qualify on the medical decision making because it says high. And to just make it simple, you know what high medical decision making would be? Things that are going to create life, death, or long term or potentially serious disability. And if you think of it, do we see or do chiropractors see patients of that nature? Yes, but not typically. So I'm not saying this will never happen, but it would be a bit unusual. I think a scenario might fit this way. What if you have a patient that's had an injury or symptoms in their back where they complain of, my low back is hurting, but right where I sit, it feels very numb or at times feels numb. Well, that could be the signs of cauda-equina syndrome. That, of course, could be very serious. That's when you're going to say, hey, let's get you to the emergency room because that could lead to paralysis. That certainly would fit because now that complexity is one that there's a high risk. And that's really the difference here is the risk. So medical decision making for a 205, I'm going to say is pretty rare. 204, I won't say is rare, but maybe not typical. 203s and 213s or 202s, I'm not going to really focus on the time. Tell me what you're seeing. I bet many of you are very efficient in evaluating a patient with a trauma that could be fairly significant and do it in a half hour or less. And when you do, it still would mean potentially a 204 or for certain a 203. So don't be afraid to start choosing a code based on the complexity of what you're seeing, not necessarily time, though I think time does play a role. One thing I do want to be clear with, though, what if you like to say, hey, Sam, the next day, I would like to do a report of findings for my patient. I'm all in. Please understand, though, that style doesn't give you an extra way to bill anything in that day. You've unbundled it. Counseling or report of findings is part of the overall E&M code. And if you choose to do it the next day, that's certainly fine. You don't bill extra for it. If it's included in the same day, then you certainly can. So be careful. However, I want to highlight something about coding, and I want you to see here, this is a denial. I had an office that I was helping that got a denial that said, hey, Sam, I got an insurance company, and this is an auto case, as you can tell, that denied them because it says here, we cannot agree to pay you or that you qualify for a 214 because you said in your own notes that you spent 20 to 25 minutes. Therefore, that doesn't qualify. A 214 requires 30 minutes. So a couple of problems I have with this is why would you ever write I spent 20 or 25? It's got to be 20, 21, 22. So to me, it tells me they were looking at the old code set probably. But had they indicated they spent 30 minutes, would they have qualified? They would have. Now, that doesn't mean just write 30 minutes because, but tell me how much time you really did spend. And remember, it's prior, during, and after, so long as it's the same day. But here's the issue I have with this particular case. You'll notice the date of loss was July of 2019. The date of the exam was February of 21. So we all would agree this was a patient being examined for an auto case basically a year and a half later. They were still having problems. I don't think the argument should have been, or what the provider should have done, is made a dispute based on time. The dispute should have been, in my opinion, being based on complexity. Would we all agree a patient who's getting care or an exam from an injury that happened a year and a half ago would be one of a fairly high complexity or severity? So I don't think time is there because clearly that's a chronic condition. Chronic condition of that nature, I think, is going to fit here. So be careful. When you're choosing your code, choose the code that fits best, whether time becomes the driver or medical decision making. And I want to be careful because just because you're efficient doesn't mean you can't bill a higher code should the medical decision making be there. So now I've given you a short little primer of it. I know that's a lot to try to absorb, but I wanted to give you a bit of it. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. Obviously, we have the network service that you can join. And remember, HJ Ross is always here for you. If you haven't taken a look, go to our website, hjrosscompany.com. Click on our Facebook page. Take a look, because what we do is update news. Here's the Medicare fee for service. I bet some of you said, "Hey Sam, what's going on? I've noticed Medicare has reduced my fees, a little bit, like 50 cents." Sequestration is back. Remember, they got rid of it during the pandemic. It's now come back. Beginning April 1st, it's back to 1%. Beginning July, it'll be back to 2%. Now, that's not new. They just re-implemented it. So when you see that 60 to 90 cents taken off, that's just something that happens. Remember, we're here for you. Check our news section. Become part of the network. Make me part of your office. I could be your staff. I could be on your team. We're here to help. ChiroSecure, HJ Ross Company are your partners. What I want to say to all of you, thank you, and I wish you well. Next week, pay attention. Sherry McAllister will be here. I'll see you all at another time. Thank you, and wishing you the best.